As I said, we've got a great evening lined up for you this evening. And Kim is going to introduce our 5 speakers in a moment. But before I pass the podium over to her, I would be remiss if I didn't point out a number of esteemed guests we have here tonight. I think she may have already left, but the Honourable Christine Stewart, former MP for this riding, was here earlier, and we were very delighted to see Christine come up. There was a conflicting appointment in Cobourg tonight that she had to rush to. We have the candidate from our riding to the east, Mr. Peter Tinsley. Peter, where are you? And his president, Laura Bigley. We call them our first cousins to the east, which is great to have them. And we've also got Grant Hume here from Durham riding, the candidate running in the election right now. And you know what? I'm going to give Grant the first couple of words of this whole thing before we get over to our main speaker. So Grant, a couple of words.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm not very formal tonight. We just came in off canvassing. We took advantage of the nice weather. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. I was telling Jamie, who's been working with me the last couple of days, this is my National Unity jacket. I bought this in Montreal about 20 years ago. My wife and I went for a vacation. Never realized we get quite that much use as it has in the last couple of years. In 2011, I ran in the federal election against Bev Oda. I actually got into it before she had her little problem with the word "not," and that all transpired, and so I got to take advantage of that and made lots of puns. It was really good. I had a good time. I was pretty disappointed with the results, as we all were, but I learned a lot about it and built up a great team of people. One of the things I did learn is the passion that people have about liberal values. We had a team of about 150 volunteers, and what made it worthwhile was going out there every day to help these people enjoy their life, and it was a lot of fun. It was well worthwhile. It's a worthy thing to do. When Bev retired at the end of July, honestly, I thought quite a bit about doing this again because it's pretty emotionally tiring. When Grant Hume goes to the door and knocks on somebody's door, and they got I had a flat tire, I could have a conversation with them, and they'd help me fix the tire, and we'd have a coffee, and we'd probably leave the best of friends, because that's the kind of person I am. When Grant Hume, the politician, knocks on the door, maybe the conversation doesn't go that way, so it's a bit of a challenge. But you learn how to live with it, and you compartmentalize it, and you realize you're doing it for the better for all of us, for us, our children, and our grandchildren. So, because of that, I said I'd do it again, and when I say I do something, I put 100% into it. So my campaign runs 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. I've got a couple more things after I leave here tonight, like we just go, go, go. And I'm inviting all of you to help us go, go, go too also. I'm a scant 30 minutes down the 401 when you do 60 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour. If you go a little faster, you can get there in a little less time. And I know this Saturday, 11:30, we're having a big blitz, canvas blitz, potluck lunch at 11:30. And we'll be out for a couple hours after that, so it doesn't take up your whole day. We'll make sure you find your way around Bowmanville or Curtis, wherever you happen to be. Keep it close to the 401. So if you can come out, we'd appreciate that. You'll have lots of other opportunities. You'll notice we've had lots of material going out, and there will continue to be more on probably an every day or every second day basis. So clearly the entire Liberal Party and Liberal circles are behind the 3 by-elections taking place. It's unfortunate there's not 4. It's sort of a shame what happened today, but it is what it is, and we're going to move with what we have. So I'd really like to thank you for inviting me tonight. I know you're going to have a great evening. I'd actually like to stay and hear all this, but I'm sure I'll have another chance. And whatever support you can give us, I would really, really appreciate, because I'm out there for everybody. So thanks very much. Thanks, Mom.
As we were singing the national anthem, we said, "God keep our land glorious and free." And I thought, if we can get people like Grant Hume into Durham riding, we'll get one giant step closer to achieving that objective. And of course, if we can get any one of these candidates to be our leader, I'm sure we'll get to where we want to get to in the long run. I'm now going to introduce Kim Rudd, who's going to take over the proceedings with our speakers. Kim, as you know, was our past candidate. She is a member of our executive. She's a tireless, hard-working, never-ending energy freak. We cannot believe the kinds of things that this woman gets herself involved in. When I gave tribute to our fundraising committee for organizing this event that we're all going to have a great evening on, Kim was there all the steps of the way, working with all of these candidate speakers, as well as working with the committee itself. She is active on each one of our committees. She's on the Shadow Caucus in Ottawa. We call her our National Liaison Officer because, frankly, we feel that the issues of this riding are not being properly represented in Ottawa. And that's just from the executive. And so we have charged Kim to keep that momentum going from 2011 and keep it going in Ottawa. And she's now on the Shadow Caucus for Women and Small Business, I think, as well as serving as our representative in Ottawa in an active and vocal way rather than what we're currently getting. So Kim, over to you. Good luck. Before you do, we need to pick the speaker's order. And then, well, we'll have them take the stage, if they may, and I'll work with you to get the speaker's orders. Well, shall you speak? You pick them?
Shall I?
Yeah, and I'll number them for you. Who goes first?
Mark.
Mark goes first, all right. And who goes second?
Jonathan.
Jonathan goes second, very good. Who goes third? Isn't this very democratic?
Alex.
Alex is number 3. I'll leave that up
Sort of
here.
like one mod hat that Tom's box is better. Joyce.
Joyce is number 4. And George is number 5. Ladies and gentlemen, Kim Rudd.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tom. I mean, Tom and the executive are certainly some of my biggest supporters and have helped me do the job that I'm doing. I agree with them. Mr. Norlock is not necessarily the voice that, a strong voice for this riding, and with the support of the executive, I do what I can to make sure that our voice is heard and that I'm involved in some of those things that are very important to this riding in Ottawa. So thank you for all of you for coming this evening and for our guest arrival. I think it's going to be an exciting time, and without any further ado, it's not me you came to listen to. That rhymes. I just wanted to say that April 14th will be here way before we know it, and we have a fabulous opportunity here tonight. As a past candidate, I know in some small measure the commitment involved in going all out for something you believe in, and I applaud and admire the interest, the commitment that our guests tonight are doing in concerning running for the leadership of the Federal Liberal Party. So without them putting this commitment forward, we as a party, I think, right now as a party, we're challenged because we don't have any permanent kind of position in terms of leadership. And I know that this race is going to be exciting, and I know that these potential candidates, as well as others out there, are going to invigorate, question, and have great conversation with Canadians across this country, and I feel privileged that we're one of the first ones that they're coming to talk to. As a party, as I said, I think we're looking forward to fulsome and invigorating discussions during this campaign. We will have each candidate speak for 5 minutes, and afterwards we will take some questions from the floor. We'll moderate them, and after the question and answer period, we would encourage you to stay, enjoy more refreshments and appetizers, and have an opportunity to meet our candidates on a more informal basis. Our questions to our candidates are simple. Rather, let me rephrase that. The question to our candidate is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. What is your vision of Canada? And what would you specifically bring to the Canadian political scene if elected as leader? While they think about that for a moment, I'm going to introduce each speaker as we know the order that we have just randomly drawn them in. It was not fixed. We want to make that clear. Marc Garneau is our first speaker this evening. In addition to being our House Leader, Marc is also the Member of Parliament for Westmount-Ville-Marie, somewhere we used to live back in the 70s. He is also a retired naval officer and past president of the Canadian Space Agency. Of course, there's also that small matter of him being the first Canadian in space, but you know, that's just sort of a sideline, although I did see some autographs happening a minute ago. Marc brings a keen analysis to policy discussion and and I know he will engage in a fulsome and responsive conversation on the issues. I would suggest, however, you don't ask him about his golf game. So, Mark, over to you. You may. Sometimes it's better to stand and do that.
Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you, Tom. Good evening, Peter. Good evening, fellow candidates. It's great to be here. And yes, I'm exploring the possibility of being in the race. I represent a riding, as Kim said, in downtown Montreal called Westmount-Ville-Marie. I also happen to be House Leader. And I'm looking seriously at throwing my hat in the ring. And if I do, it is to bring serious change, and I mean bold change, to both Canada, to the government of Canada, and also to the Liberal Party. A little bit about me. This is really my third career. My first career was in the Navy. That's what I wanted to do when I was young, and I started off in the Navy. And if I hadn't happened to be at the right place at the right time when Canada decided to have an astronaut program, I probably would have made my career in the Navy. But I did get chosen as an astronaut, had the chance to represent Canada in space on 3 flights. But I'm particularly proud of the fact that I was at the Canadian Space Agency after as its president for 4 years. And that's basically the equivalent of NASA, but for Canada, but on a smaller scale. But I was still responsible for $300 million of the taxpayers' money during each of the 4 years that I was there, and a staff of very talented people. And now I'm in my third career, which is politics. And why do I want to be the leader of the party? Why do I want to throw myself into this race? To put it very, very simply, I want to get rid of Stephen Harper. That is the reason. If I expand on that a little bit more, it is to say that Canada that we are becoming now is not the Canada that I grew up in, and the Canada that I want to see for my children. A Canada that is more tolerant, a Canada that is more generous, a Canada that is more compassionate, a Canada that is viewed as a model by other countries in this world. That's the Canada that I grew up in, and it's the Canada that I think the great majority of Canadians want to see. So that is one of the reasons I'm getting into this race. The other thing is that I think that if you look at the record of this government, they're blowing it on the economy. And I will take it to Stephen Harper if I run on this and show him how Canada can be run much more efficiently from an economy point of view. You know, Stephen Harper is very lucky that he took over from the Liberal government, because when he took over in 2006, the state of the government was a very healthy one. As you know, we had record surpluses at that time, and during the 3 years that followed, we had good banking regulations. And if it weren't for the fact that our commodities, that is our natural resources, which we're blessed with in this country, and that we should take advantage of it, but that there was a strong market for these, Canada would not be doing nearly as well from an economic point of view. And he's getting a lot of credit for it, but he doesn't deserve that credit. Because in terms of the economy, we could be doing a lot better. And that would be the primary focus of my involvement if I throw my hat into the ring. Is there a future for the Liberal Party? You bet there is. We are the party that is fiscally responsible, that is socially progressive, that does use scientific evidence to base policy on. We are a party that believes in working with the provinces and not being divisive. There is a lot for the future of Canada with the Liberal Party. But at the same time, it's also very true to say that we have to change as a party. There is no longer a there's no longer a sort of short circuit to get back to being the government. We have to do things differently as a party from the way we were doing it before. We can't be in this because we want to be the government. We want to do this because we care about what Canadians care about, which is jobs, security of employment, security when they do retire, the values that I spoke about, the kind of Canada that we want. That's why we as Liberals want to work towards getting the Liberal Party back to being the government in this country. And we have a lot of hard work to do. This is not an effort by people who are just there to get back in power. This is about taking Canada in the direction that we want to take it. And if I do jump into the ring, I will have three priorities. I mentioned the economy. The other is the elephant in the room, which is healthcare, because it is taking up more and more of our budgets and leaving less and less for other things. Believe me, I believe in universal and all the 5 principles of the Canadian Health Care Act, and we will respect those. But we've also got to try to see if we can manage the continuously growing costs of health. And finally, democratic reform. I work in a parliament where the government uses a record amount of time allocation. They are secretive in committee. They use prorogation as a tool, where they present us with massive omnibus bills that should be really broken down into many, many bills. Democratic reform is very much needed in this country because we elect people to go to Ottawa to represent us all, and at the moment, that's not the way it's happening. So if I do jump into the ring, I hope I will be able to count on your support. I really do care about the candidate that I think every one of you in this room cares about. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Our next speaker for this evening is Jonathan Mousley. Jonathan is a senior government economist and has a deep understanding of public policy in his role in the Ontario Office of the Budget and Treasury Board. You should go talk to Tony Clement, actually. Jonathan was also a legislative and senior policy advisor in the Quinte government in the areas of Veterans Affairs and National Defence. We look forward to hearing more about Jonathan's vision. Jonathan?
Thank you very much. Just a little bit about myself, a little bit more. As I say, I work in what I consider to be the center of government in the terms of the financial fiscal policy making. It's really the area that decides on expenditure and revenue management and policy and planning. And so every day one's confronted with a series of decisions about how we use taxpayer money the most efficiently, the best way, maximizing taxpayer value. It's something that all governments struggle with. It's not an easy area of policy because there's never enough money for all of the requirements that we have for spending. But it's an important area. And I often am asked about the question. You've not been an elected official. What kind of experience do you bring to potential leadership? And I've always responded that there are 2 ways of entering a race. One is with elected experience, and one is with a lot of government experience. And certainly working in Ottawa for many years on Parliament Hill for a senior minister, then working in the private sector for a number of years, including in international government relations for a large Canadian company, and then most recently for the last 13 years working for the Ministry of Finance at the Office of the Budget and Treasury Board. It's given me a grasp of public policy that I think is equal to that of somebody, for example, who served in Parliament for many years. So there's always different perspectives that one brings to a table when one's running for leadership. And I think it's important. That's what's so exciting about a leadership race that will have potentially many candidates. We all bring our different perspectives and our different backgrounds and experience to the table. So that's a little bit about me. I was actually born in Kingston, down the road, and so I can consider myself effectively an Eastern Ontarian, although I've been based in Toronto for most of my life. So that's a little bit about me. My vision for Canada is really the vision for the Liberal Party, because I think the Liberal Party represents the principles and the values of most Canadians. It still does. It still holds true. The 3 pillars that we often talk about as Liberals are those of social justice, environmental sustainability, and fiscal responsibility. And certainly if you look at the record of the Liberal Party over the last, 50 years, you can even go further back to that than that, that's certainly one of those are the 3 principles that we certainly have always governed on, and we can be proud of our record on those areas. We need to return Canada to those 3 pillars. It's a fallacy that people believe that, for example, the current government is strong on fiscal responsibility. There hasn't been a government in recent memory that has spent as much money as the Conservatives are spending right now, when we're not even in the deepest recession that we certainly had a few years ago. So there's no excuse for that. We need to remind Canadians when we're talking as Liberals about the wonderful record that we have had as Liberals being fiscally responsible. 6 balanced budgets in the Chrétien government. And that's something that we need to remind Canadians of and we need to be proud of. My vision for Canada is one where there's a strong and active federal government. that is sometimes in areas where it needs to be to make Canada better. You know, it's not about bigger government, but it's about smarter government and more effective government. In the last few years, we've seen sort of the retrenchment or the deconfederalization of Canada, that we've seen the federal government sort of step out of its role in many areas of public policy where it really needs to be. So for example, if we think of energy policy, you know, we haven't had a federal government involved in an energy strategy or a national energy plan in the last few years. Alison Redford, the Premier of Alberta, has effectively become the National Energy Minister. And that's not acceptable for a government that's... Energy policy is a national policy, absolutely, and the federal government needs to be there. Likewise, in something like healthcare, you know, when we're talking about the health accord, where's the federal minister of health been? It's all been the premiers who have been talking about healthcare policy. And the Harper government would like us to believe that that's a provincial jurisdiction. Well, it is in operational wise, but the federal government has a massive role to play, still is a major funder of healthcare in our country. There's a massive role to play in the kind of thing that unifies us as Canadians, which is access to equal and effective healthcare wherever we live. You know, somebody in Prince Edward Island doesn't have the same access to medication, for example, that somebody in Ontario does. That's not acceptable. The federal government needs to reinsert itself in our lives in those kinds of areas where it makes sense. And that's not about, again, bigger government, it's about smarter government. You know, Canada was built on the belief that working together, there isn't anything that we can't accomplish together. If we think about back into history, where we built a railroad, and then we built lots of the infrastructure that we still have in Canada today. Then we built a national healthcare system and social programs. We were all proud as Canadians of those accomplishments that we did together. It was a common ambition, a common purpose that we had as Canadians, the things that unified us. We need to return to that. We need to find that common ambition again as Canadians that we seem to have lost. At least the federal government has made us believe that that doesn't play a role in that anymore. We need to find a newfound sense of common purpose. And we need to champion a set of national priorities. So some of those things, and maybe we'll get to some of those in the questions, but some of those are expanding the Canada Health Act to include more parts of our healthcare system. You know, we believe that we have one of the best systems in the world in healthcare, and we do. But we need to make sure that it's up to date and it's with the modern world, because it was designed in the 1960s and it hasn't quite kept up with the changes in our healthcare system. You know, we need to look at post-secondary education and skills training to make sure that Canadians get jobs, especially young Canadians. We need to reform immigration so that our immigrants can succeed. We need to revamp our social safety net, much as like one of the reports that just came out for Ontario. We need to do that at a federal level to make it more effective. We need to talk about environmental sustainability and resource sustainability. And we need to talk about stable and predictable funding for public infrastructure. You know, public infrastructure, and even at a local level, is a national priority. There's no question about it. Again, the Harper government might make municipalities believe that it's a local matter. Every day that we sit in traffic and we spend a lot of time and effort getting to places and we don't have the kind of infrastructure that we need, or even going to the borders for border crossing, that's a national productivity issue. The federal government, like all governments around the world, needs to be involved in our infrastructure programs, for example, in public transit. So those are the kinds of things we need to keep up with the global transformation. That's the vision for the Liberal Party and the vision for Canada. We can't just rest on attacking the opposition. We have to find a reason that Canadians will vote for the Liberal Party. And that's something that I've often stressed. We need to have a positive vision that people can be attracted to. That's how we win elections. We want a better Canada. Canadians deserve better. So those are kind of the things that I want to propose as a potential Liberal candidate for leader of the party if I should enter the race. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to your comments later on, as well as questions to all of us, directed to all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Our next speaker this evening is Alex Burton. Alex is the, I don't think you're the driver necessarily, Alex. It's a big bus that's out there. But certainly Alex is crossing the country in a bus, and I think there may be a few more buses coming along behind you at some point. Alex is a lawyer and Crown Prosecutor for the British Columbia Ministry of the Attorney General in the Organized Crime Unit. As the president of the Vancouver Kingsway EDA, I know Alex has been involved in the last 2 election campaigns. I know we will want to hear his perspective on, among other things, the failed Harper Tough on Crime agenda. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you to Kim and to the EDA for holding this event and inviting all of us to come and speak to you tonight. It's great to be in a room with so many smiling Liberal faces. I have driven across the country and in places, stopped in places where they haven't seen Liberals in a long time. And it's not always easy, but it's what we've got to do to rebuild the party. Merci et bonsoir. Je suis très content d'être ici avant vous et j'aimerais partager avec vous ma vision pour le Canada. I'm here this evening because I want to share with you my vision for Canada. Je suis un père, mari, j'ai deux incroyables enfants et mon épouse est une femme formidable. C'est vrai, je suis procureur à la Couronne dans l'unité crime organisée. I am a Crown Counsel and I work in the organized crime unit in British Columbia. And I've seen the best and the worst of what our society has to offer. But I'm here to talk tonight about my vision for the country. And I believe that we as a party and as a country must focus on 6 key areas. And they are building a just and secure society, democratic reform, revitalizing and re-energizing our economy, our place in the world, building a Canada of opportunity, and rebuilding liberalism from the ground up, not from the top down. How are we going to do that? And what are our specific ideas? Well, I'm going to share them with you tonight. First, building a just and secure society. Well, we know a just society is one in which we reach out and embrace all members of society. We create that level playing field through equal opportunity to make sure all Canadians can reach their full potential. An example, unfortunately in this country, more than 1 in 7 children live in poverty. It's not acceptable. And if we can put a child in every classroom, we can put a meal in their stomachs to get their day started right, to make sure that they can focus on the education they deserve so that they can become full members in our just society. But if you live in a society where violence is a regular occurrence, you don't feel like you live in a just society. And we need to make sure that when it comes to violence, we separate people from our community to make sure we feel safer in our homes and in our communities. But we can do better than a simplified, tough on crime policy of the Harper government. We can be smart on crime. And it makes no sense to send petty criminals, young kids, to jail to learn how to be better criminals. There has to be a way of making sure that we divert those people back into being full contributing members of society. Second, democratic reform. We need to have governance that's about people's interests, not serving politicians in Ottawa, frankly. The Harper government came to power on promises of transparency, accountability, allowing MPs more freedom to express their personal views and actually represent their constituents. And those promises, as we all know, are long gone. And we can change that. How can we do that? Well, here's a specific idea. About 1/3 of the votes in the House are for the budget and promises made in an election. And let's face it, if you're elected to Ottawa and you've promised to do things, you ought to be able to deliver. Another 2/3, or the second third, are discretionary. There may be things we want to make sure our party is all marching in the same direction on. We want to send a clear message to Canadians. That leaves about 1/3 of the votes in the House, where we can be saying to our MPs, hey, people elected you to come here. Represent their interests. Do what you believe is right. And let's see that as a strength in our democratic system, not a weakness. It forces us to go and reach across the aisle for some of those votes and actually try and build a coalition in the House. It forces the House to actually work for people. And I believe we can do that. Third, we need to revitalize our economy. We need to re-energize our economy. There are parts of this country that are suffering where unemployment is 20–25%. Yes, we came through the financial crisis better than some other countries. And yes, we're blessed with natural resources. But it's not the sole focus of our economy. It may be the sole focus for this government. But there is a knowledge economy that we want to be engaged in going into the future. There is a digital economy. We have a reputation around the world as good financial managers, and we ought to be leveraging that in our economy. It's not enough just to pull things out of the ground. And we need fiscal and economic management that looks to the future, not just about how I can get your vote next week or next election. Our economic and fiscal policy must be looking 10, 20 years down the road. We need to be building that sustainable economy, frankly, for my kids, and one day for their children. This government's not doing that. It's economically short-sighted, and we have to hold them accountable for it. Fourth, our place in the world, Canada's place in the world. Who are we when we step onto the international stage? We need to go back to being that country that was an economic and social and, yes, moral leader in the world. United Nations peacekeeping was one of our great contributions. We are now ranked 53rd in the world in support and contribution for peacekeeping. 53rd. Our Prime Minister goes to New York, during the time of the UN General Assembly meeting and deliberately thumbs his nose at the United Nations. Well, you think that doesn't have repercussions? Of course it does. When we're sitting at a table during trade talks or climate change talks, and there's a Canadian initiative and we want our allies to come on board and support our ideas, what do you think they're going to say? They're going to remember. They knew what Harper did, and we're not going to get the support we need. The world is changing rapidly, and we are going to have to be at that table at trade talks. I'm getting the poll, I'm getting the sign. Very quickly, if I just may, I'll move right on. Two quick things. Building that Canada of opportunity. We need national leadership on healthcare. 1 in 7 Canadians will be a senior by the end of this decade. 50 to 70% of provincial budgets will be spent on healthcare. We need to tackle that. We need national leadership to do it. We need a national pharmacare system to make sure that access to medicine is equal across the country. And last but not least, we need to rebuild the Liberal Party itself, from the ground up. I'm a riding association president. I unfortunately get 10 emails saying, have you done this? Can you do that? Please do this. I don't get a single one that says, how can we help you? We need an accountable, step-by-step plan to rebuild our party, in every riding in the country, including ridings in Western Canada, where I'm from. Because if we're going to be a national party, we have to build in the West. Merci pour votre attention. Et merci.
Thank you, Alex. Joyce Murray is our Member of Parliament for Vancouver Quadra, and she's the former, I heard a woo out there, and former Environment Minister of British Columbia. In addition to being a businesswoman, Joyce is a strong voice around the Women's Caucus table and is also our critic for small business. A very key portfolio for Northumberland Quinte West. I'm honored to sit on her advisory committee and know that Joyce will bring an important perspective to the leadership discussion. Joyce?
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be here amongst fellow Liberals, fellow candidates, future MPs. It's great to come and find summer here in Cobourg. Us Vancouverites had to come all the way here for that. And it's great to be amongst family as well. So it turns out I have a sister-in-law, Alida, and a brother-in-law, John, with their spouses Sue and Joe, who are here, who live in this area because my husband grew up in Bowmanville. So it's great to be back in this beautiful part of Ontario. It's a pleasure to arrive here. So I'm happy to talk about my vision for Canada and what I'd bring if elected leader of the federal Liberal Party. But first I'd like to reflect a moment with you on what is a leader. And I think the first benchmark for any leader of any organization is to know who you are and what you stand for. And a true leader is someone who underscores the values that you hold dear and put those into action. But here's a challenge. We don't live in a static world. We're changing, the world is changing, and while our values and principles as Liberals stay true, circumstances do not. So Liberals need to understand how we've evolved to get to where we are today and also understand the changes that are needed for tomorrow. And then we need the kind of leader who will take us there. The Liberal Party of Canada has a great history filled with great leaders. The question that we have to ask ourselves is this: what we Liberals have achieved in the past enough for the future? And I think Canadians answered that question over the last few elections, unfortunately, and never in living memory have we had as few Liberals in the House of Commons as we do today. It's a bit lonely there, isn't it, Mark? So that has to change. And the first thing we have to do is what we're doing in rooms like this across the country. We're asking why. Is it because Liberals are no longer able to provide value to Canadians that we wish to serve? I don't think so. But what we need to be able to do is to understand how to provide value today and tomorrow, not 2 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 or 50 years ago. And so we have to begin by challenging some of our assumptions. And I don't want to slight any of the men in the room, but I think women are very good at that. So in my own family, I'm often called upon to come up with pragmatic, rational solutions to the challenges that we face. And I did the same thing as I built a business with my husband Dirk over 25 years, which has planted its 1 billionth tree across Canada last year. So I think when I'm on a panel with Mark, the astronaut, I have to describe myself as a down-to-earth woman because I personally planted 500,000 of those trees. So when I'm looking at how to address a challenge, I have to ask about some of the expectations that I have or my family has. Are they too high? Are they too low? Has a sense of entitlement crept in? Is there some inertia? Have we grown complacent? And the same questions are being asked today about the Liberal Party of Canada. Were we so used to being in power that we took power for granted? Were we so enamored of giant personalities that we forgot about the hard work that's needed to build a party and build a country? Were we so transfixed by our past that we forgot that we have a future in front of us too? And I think the answer to those questions is yes. Our party is broken, and the people of Canada are counting on us to fix it. And we need to do that to get rid of Stephen Harper. But the party, and so what Mark and I see every day in the House of Commons is that the party isn't the only thing in need of fixing. Look at Parliament. Today we have a Prime Minister and a government in Ottawa that is absolutely ruthless about subverting our democratic institutions. Conservative ministers lying in the House with impunity, omnibus bills that gut our ability to question and confront the government, a government that values ideology over facts, that stacks the judiciary, politicizes the bureaucracy. These things diminish us all. They make us less equal. They make Canadians disengage from politics. So I want to work in a House of Commons that is as serious and hardworking as I am. And I want a Liberal Party that is inclusive and rational and intent on bringing good government back to Canada and bringing Kim and Grant to the House of Commons. And above all, I want Canada to be progressive, prosperous, and sustainable, and respected on the world stage once again. And to do that, we need a party and a leader who can create consensus instead of bitterness and divisions, who's not afraid to roll up her sleeves and do what needs to be done to get things moving again. But none of this is going to come easily. Our job is to remind Liberals of what we've been in the past, but much more importantly, what we can be today and what we must be tomorrow. To ask Canadians to celebrate not only the classic principles of liberalism that are woven into the fabric of the nation, so woven in that they're being stolen by the NDP and in some cases the Conservatives, but we need to ask them to explore with us new ideas for a new liberalism. And that's one that extends the freedoms, extends the equality, responsibility, the opportunities to our children and to their children, so that our children can have confidence in their future. So we've done it before as Liberals, and we can do it again. And over the next several months, I hope to share some of my specific ideas and thoughts about policy on how we can move this great party and this great country forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And certainly, last but certainly not least, George Tkach, he's specialized in the tech sector as a senior partner and lawyer with the law firm of McCarthy Tetro in Toronto. Among other initiatives, George has put forward a background paper on his vision for turbocharging the economy and addressing our unemployment and underemployment among Canada's youth. As a riding with still one of the highest unemployment rates in the province, we look forward to hearing his thoughts. George?
So I'm interested in leading the Liberal Party, and then subsequently the Government of Canada, because I want to take this country into the 21st century in a confident, sensible way. And Harper is taking us back to the 1950s, and Mulcair is stuck around 1975. And if we get this right, if we rebuild the Liberal Party to focus on the economy as well as some very sensible and required social policies, we can take this country forward. Now, on the economy, you might expect me to focus on that because I've spent over 25 years working in this country with businesses that are small, medium-sized, as well as large. A bunch of the companies that you see around Cobourg, some shutting down, some opening up. I know you've got some particular expertise in plastics and some other areas. But I think the Liberal Party absolutely has to re-engage once again on the economy. We have to talk about jobs. There's some young people in the room, I bet you they're very nervous about what they're going to be doing after high school or university or college, even though you have a very good campus here for the Fleming Center. And some of you who are parents are worried about your kids having jobs because you'd like them to maybe move out of the house a little bit sooner than they're planning. And those of you who are grandparents are very worried about your grandchildren's jobs. So yes, a huge part of my vision for the country is that we turbocharge the economy. Harper focuses almost exclusively on natural resources. We have to make those cleaner. We have to be proud of every barrel of oil that we export, from the oil sands and otherwise. That includes creating a ton of extra jobs. So yes, I'm going to be the economy candidate. But as you might expect from someone whose parents came here as refugees, they were penniless, they had nothing but the clothes on their backs. They left their country in Eastern Europe not knowing a word of English or French, which ironically today, if the Harper rules would have been enforced back in 1957, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd be speaking with an Aussie accent or something like that. But I absolutely know, because I've lived through it, very modest circumstances in downtown Toronto, I know the value of public education, of a public healthcare system, of what it means when you need a leg up, and the Liberal government is there to help you. Whether it was the Mike Pearson government, Trudeau the Elder, as I call him, and so on. And we absolutely need some very forward-thinking social policy. Alex, you've already mentioned, there are kids today in this country going to school hungry in the morning. Completely unacceptable. Harper, just not on his agenda. You look at that 18 to 30-year-old demographic. If you include, as you mentioned, Kim, underemployment and unemployment, it's hitting about 27%. An entire generation about to be lost to the workforce. Completely unacceptable. On a besoin d'une culture d'innovation, une culture de science. We absolutely have to turbocharge the economy so that that number improves dramatically. I've been crisscrossing the country talking to parents with young children. We desperately need a meaningful child care program that's sensible and affordable, because I'm very keen on women's rights. And the Harper approach, well, let's just give women a tax credit to leave the workforce and go back into the home. I take it, he's taking us back to the 1950s. And for those of you who are seniors in the room, and you're hearing about the eligibility age going up from 65 to 67, where did that come from? It was disgusting how he did it in Switzerland. He didn't even have the guts to announce it here in Canada. And a Liberal government will never forget what seniors have given to this country and how we need to pay you back rather than what Harper seems to think is the appropriate approach. So that's some of my vision for the country. Let me also tell you about my leadership style. Because while I've not sat around a federal cabinet table, I have led a large group for about 15 years nationally in this country. And the core principle that I have is none of us is as strong as all of us. So when Harper demonizes the environmental movement, I say, shame on you for dividing Canadians. And when Mulcair goes to Alberta, and I agree, Alex, we have to re-engage in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We have to make a breakthrough there if we want to call ourselves a national political party. And Mulcair is doing the same thing as Harper, demonizing a region. It was Chrétien who said, there's nothing easier for a national leader to do in this country than to get 9 provinces to gang up on one. And that's exactly what Harper's doing. That's exactly the style that Mulcair has. My style is we all have to work together. And again, the Liberal Party can be the party that unifies this country. And finally, let me speak to the Liberal Party itself. In many parts of this country, it is broken. It needs to be fixed. But I'm telling you, the quick fix of merging with the NDP, or merging with the Greens, or collaborating in a fashion so that we don't run candidates in some ridings, so that the Greens won't run in some other ridings against us. If you're looking for that kind of accommodation, please do not support me, because I am going to be the candidate that is going to say to all proud Liberals, if we get it right, if we put together a strong economic platform with sensible social policy, we can build that 40–45% majority. And we can absolutely earn back the trust and the confidence of Canadian voters, and we won't need to merge with anyone. Because the day when it comes where we disallow Liberals in this country to vote for the party of their choice, well, that's not going to happen if I'm leader of this party. So thank you very much, Cobourg, for hosting us. We're delighted to be here for the Indian summer that Joyce may have brought, or may, you know, it was here already. Thanks very much. Looking forward to answering some questions.
Burton. I don't have mine, I tell you. Thank you very much, everyone. That was very inspiring. And yes, just you may have noticed that the liberalism, as you call it, is very alive and well in Northumberland Quinte West. So we're very proud of that, and we have great support in this riding and very engaged members, not just of the party, but of the community in general, and we're excited to see everyone here tonight. We'll now move to the question and answer, and there is a mic here. I'm going to moderate them, and I'll try and be gentle with me when I move you along, please.
And there's another mic right here. If people on the edges would like a mic, I'll bring it over to them. But Kim, if I could just...
Certainly.
I'm going to have a
fight. Are you Anna? Have we decided that?
Yeah, I know. Okay, I think I'm Anna. I'm going to have a fight in the family after introducing our first cousins from Prince Edward Hastings, without having introduced our brother from Prince Edward, from Northumberland Quinte West, Lou Rinaldi, the former member of Parliament for our riding. Lou.
Soon to be the next MPP
right.
Again of our riding.
We need them there.
We need them.
So, questions?
Anyone? And if you state your name, that would be fantastic.
My name is Scott Lamberton. I heard many of the candidates tonight talk about the two pillars or the two sides of the Liberal Party, which is fiscal responsibility and a just society, or progressive, whatever might be the case, or social progress. My question to the candidates is, it seems in times when it's fiscally challenging, when world economic conditions make it very difficult for us, that whatever the government is, the austerity agenda comes in, and it's cut, 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 cut. And those people who are most vulnerable in society, who could benefit from social progress or the just society, that agenda goes out the window. So my question to all of you is, what specific revenue enhancement or revenue ideas do you have to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Okay, thank you. Scott, why don't we start this end with Alex and move down? You can just answer from your...
Right there. Thank you very much.
That's great, Alex. And we'll just ask you to keep your answers very brief.
Okay.
Thank you.
Certainly. I think that we need to be a party of specifics, and if I may put in a shameless plug for a minute, alexburton.ca, my 6 themes are there with very specific ideas. Very quickly, I believe in small L liberalism. I think it's important, and you're right that in fiscal times the government often brings down an agenda that cuts services. Here's my view. We have a massive debt and a deficit in this country, and we need to get it under control. And we need to do that not because I'm ideological about stopping government from doing things, but just the opposite. If we want government to be able to fund those programs you're talking about, to be able to be that source of that hand up, it cannot be shackled by debt and deficit. And the Liberal Party has done that before, and we can do it again. It gives the government the freedom to make the difference in people's lives. And we don't know what the next thing coming down the pipe will be, and the government needs that flexibility to be able to do it without being shackled by debts and deficits.
Thank you, Alex. Joyce?
I think most Canadians are looking for a thriving economy that is based on protecting and even restoring the environment. And we missed the boat on that during this last recession. Turns out that the U.S. invested 14 times per capita what Canada did in efficiency, in clean energy, in technology, in lean manufacturing, all of those things that will make us a lower carbon economy in the future. And that lower carbon economy is about jobs. And we see that in Germany, where they've created 500,000 jobs by reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that they're producing in Germany. So I think that is an element of our future economy. And just one last point on that, you've all heard about the National Roundtable on the economy, on the environment and the economy, a conservative appointed board. That group was just had their funding cut. Why? Because they were saying exactly the same message I've just given. What they've said is if we are not going to be looking out for the economy and reducing the environment by reducing our emissions, what we are going to do is we are going to miss economic opportunities, and we are going to invite economic risks of tariffs. And the Harper government didn't like that message and certainly hasn't been acting on it, but it is a huge opportunity for a thriving economy of the future.
Thank you, Joyce. Mark?
Thank you very much, Kim. All governments should, of course, whenever it's possible, be fiscally responsible, but there are times, such as the recession that we started to experience in 2009, where in fact it makes more sense to do some stimulation of the economy because people are losing their jobs. If I look at the examples of some of the things that this government, that I'm talking about the Harper government, put into place, they didn't really address the requirement. They bragged a lot about some of the tax credits that they instituted during this time, but if you look at them carefully, they were what you call non-refundable tax credits. What that meant was that if you were in a lower income bracket, you couldn't take advantage of it at all because you had no taxable income to offset this tax credit. And that is an example of why this government, the Harper government, doesn't care about all Canadians. The fact is, this should have been something that particularly allowed low-income Canadians to take advantage of it, but they were non-refundable, so they couldn't take advantage of it. When you need to stimulate the economy in a time of recession, for example, for youth, as you know, young people, their unemployment rate is twice the national average. And yet, the young people of this country today are those who are going to be taking over. And when we retire, and they're going to be left with a large responsibility. There are measures that can be taken to incentivize companies to hire young people by giving tax credits to the companies if they hire the people. That way you incentivize them, you encourage them to take on people, young people, into jobs by giving them something that will allow them to be able to take on more people. That's another example. Another final example is that the EI premiums went up this year for all employees in companies. That's a payroll tax. The government didn't need to do that this year. The economy is still fragile. So there are measures that the federal government can put in place to help in a situation where the economy is fragile and that are specifically targeted. But this is an NDP, this is a Conservative government that focuses not on all Canadians, but on the middle and the upper class, and unfortunately lower income Canadians are left out in the cold. Final example on home care. There was a tax credit provided for people who take care of a sick relative at home. Again, non-refundable tax credit. You couldn't take advantage of it if you happen to be in lower income.
Thank you, Mark. We're just going.
Very tough, good first question. One of the adages I always recall is, Henry Ford's famous quip that if my workers aren't paid enough to buy my cars, who's going to buy my cars? And I think that really holds true still today. We often forget the fact that those who are more disadvantaged financially are an incredible source of income and wealth for Canada and Canadians, as they are in any country. And if they can't afford to spend, then our economy doesn't do very well. And often we're seeing that now with stagnating incomes for middle-income Canadians and decreasing incomes for poor Canadians. Only a few Canadians are doing much better than they did 20 years ago, and that's a sad fact. A lot of people who are working very hard, full-time, in some cases 2 or even 3 jobs, are still struggling to make a go of it in a modern and very expensive economy in many cases. We need to remember that fiscal stimulus, one of the criticisms that government often has is that it cuts without remembering about the fact that it needs to stimulate the economy. It's all fine and dandy to cut, but we also need to remember the other equation, which is the revenue equation. How do we build economic prosperity and growth so that we can keep jobs and build more jobs and actually pay people more? So we need to remember that when we're looking at fiscal policy. Now, when times are tough, of course, it's easy to cut, and we forget about those who struggle the most. the key balance is to try to reform our social security system so that people have an incentive to work, that people benefit from working, getting outside what we call the welfare wall. The welfare wall basically says sometimes it's better to be on welfare than to work, because if you start working, you lose a lot of the benefits that you had, like housing and dental care and medication and subsidized daycare, those kinds of things. One thing that's very interesting, the Ontario government now has a report that looks about how we can ensure that in a time of fiscal restraint, we use the social security system to be much, much more effective, making sure that people have much more opportunity when they're poor. So it's a question of ensuring that we don't cut people who already suffer enough from cuts, but that we also look at the fiscal stimulus part. And I'll just close by saying, you know, one of the constant complaints is that corporations are sitting on several $100 billion of income that have accumulated because of a very low corporate tax rate. And I think that we do need, as a Liberal Party, to look very seriously at that corporate tax rate. I think we need to be careful when we talk about raising taxes, but I do think there's some room to raise the corporate income tax back up. You know, Ireland has a 15% corporate income tax rate, and Ireland ain't doing so well right now. So we need to be mindful of that. Estonia has a flat tax rate of 5%. Estonia, corporations aren't flocking to Estonia. We need to be careful about setting the right kinds of rates, but being mindful that the rate has a big impact on how much we can afford. And right now, Canadian governments don't have the kind of income supports that they used to have, revenue supports that they used to have. So we need to be careful with that.
Thank you very much. George.
Alex already talked about the importance of keeping the fiscal side of government spending under control. Absolutely. One thing I would absolutely do in the first 100 days is a very intense review of the F-35 fighter aircraft program. One plane, to buy it and run it for 20 years, $450 million. It's an astounding number. At some point, the Canadian government has to say, enough is enough. That plane we can't afford. We need a plane, we need a defense mechanism, absolutely, but not this plane. And then you take the savings from that and you plow it into social investment in people. Typically, in my case, I'm thinking about digital, tech, and I don't want to scare you with those words. I'm going to leave you with one thought. Mabel's Labels. This is a small company in Hamilton, Ontario. 3 mothers with young kids sitting around one day comparing notes about how many clothes their kids lose. T-shirts, booties, you know the routine. One of them comes up with a label. The other 2 go online, Facebook, Twitter, and very savvy. Today, 40 employees, 10,000 square foot facility. It's a knock it out of the park success story. And don't think for a moment that Cobourg can't do something like that. You've got one of the best music halls in the province just down the road on King Street. Start thinking about all sorts of programming, and not just for local folks. The city of Stratford is taking the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, and they're turning it into a program to teach 500,000 pilots in China how to speak English. And they're going to make a ton of money, and they're going to retransform themselves yet again. And down the street, down the highway, I remember when people said, "What? Wine? North of Belleville? No, it will never happen." The spirit of Northumberland County is fantastic. We can do all sorts of things, and we can make sure that our kids have jobs here, that people can live great lives here, and that seniors can retire with confidence here. We just have to think some big entrepreneurial thoughts.
Thank you very much, George.
Kim, I think we have time for one more question, if our speakers can keep it to a minute or a minute and a half.
Yeah, really short. It's really challenging.
I know. We'll have time.
You know, I think they're up to
one-on-one.
the task. They'll have a glass of wine after this, so maybe that's the incentive to keep it short.
And we have lots of one-on-one time later on with the
Right,
audience.
please. Ian.
And very short questions. For George, did you actually read Jeffrey Rubin's book, or did he talk to you before? Because it's good merchandising for your thought, I think.
Well, many of his thoughts, I think, are just common sense. But for instance, Sweden already earns a third of its economic growth through what I'm talking about. Canada's at 10%. If we just close that gap, that would be hundreds of thousands of new jobs for Canadians.
Well, I think Joyce alluded to Germany, and they followed that same benchmark or blueprint. The other question is, would you, as Prime Minister, encourage the rewarding of good health to individual Canadians?
Okay, so I think we're going to let everyone answer that question. Good question, Ian. And why don't we start with George and work the way back here? Seeing it's the last question.
I'm actually just working on a project now in my other day job where we're putting together a wellness network. We're encouraging people, for instance, with chronic diabetes to come onto the system, learn to manage that system, that problem, and we've got to start rewarding people for being better about themselves, for doing all the right things, diet, lifestyle, so on and so forth. And if we just redirected some of the healthcare budget to that, I think it would pay huge dividends. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Very much in favor of that. Same thing. There's an economics theorist called Cass Sunstein who has this idea of the nudge. And the nudge is that you get government to sort of nudge people to change their behavior without actually forcing them to change their behavior. It's something that the Obama administration was very much in favor of many years ago. And it works very true. I mean, you don't want to force, we live in a free and democratic society. You can't force people not to drink pop or to eat chips or sugar. But you certainly can design policies that nudge people in the right direction. So that's something that I'm certainly in favor of. And there are lots of things that we can do in primary health care. I happen to be the chair of a family health team where we have a multidisciplinary team of physicians, a dietitian, mental health worker, social health worker, all of those things together in chronic disease management. But the major basis of family health teams is health promotion. Can we save dollars in healthcare by getting people to really change their lifestyle? And it's amazing what a little bit of education, for example, will do to people who may not have that experience. The family health team that I'm chair of specializes in seniors and immigrants. And there's a large dearth of education and information in the immigrant community, for example, about some of the health changes, or the dietary changes and other lifestyle changes that really make a difference to reducing their use of the healthcare system. That has to be a focus of our healthcare system, and I have a large section on that on my website, and I'll also shamelessly plug mine, which is Mousley.ca, if you remember how you spell my last name, and there's a section on primary healthcare in there as well.
Shamelessly promotion of websites is completely acceptable.
Okay.
Mark?
Well, I'm glad you brought up healthcare, and it is one of the three priorities as far as I'm concerned in my platform. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Certainly, in the end, good health is its own reward. So people who actually take care of themselves benefit from being healthy. But the idea is a good one, the idea of incentivizing people to adopt healthy lifestyles, and that includes not only what they eat, but the exercise that they do. So it's an interesting policy area because in the end, the potential for saving huge amounts of money on that elephant in the room, healthcare, is a very appealing one, and it's a very good suggestion.
Thank you, Mark. Joyce?
Two things that I want to mention about that. One is that a lot of the health problems are related to social determinants of health. And what we have in Canada is growing income inequality. Our income inequality is growing faster than it is in the United States, believe it or not. And the research is very clear that the bigger the gap between the have and the have-not, the unhealthier the whole range of people in the population are, as well as many other measures of satisfaction go down for everyone across the spectrum. So we do have to address the income inequality gap by having that as a lens in whatever policies we put in place. And the Harper government is putting in place policies that are increasing that gap. So I think that is the key. That is one key. The other key is that the kind of collaborative and forward-looking work that Jonathan was talking about, there are a lot of those pilots that have been taking place right across Canada, because under a Liberal government, before we lost government to Stephen Harper, there was a pot of funding of hundreds of millions of dollars for exactly that purpose. Let's work together across different levels of government, across different specialties, across different facilities, and figure out patient-centered collaborative care. Those pilot projects are sitting on a shelf. And the people that found ways to improve people's health at lower cost are tearing their hair out, because there is no continuity with that. So it's not like we don't know what to do to have cheaper, better, more effective support for people's health. It's that we don't have leadership from the federal government. So that's exactly what our Prime Minister has done, is washed his hands of any responsibility on this level by the federal government, and that has got to stop. We need leadership on the federal level on that, and other things where by working together we can get better results and better value for Canadians.
Thank you, Joyce. Alex.
I believe the question is, when you're Prime Minister, will you reward Canadians or incentivize them to lead healthier lives? Yes.
Being yes, because as Liberals, yes, we believe, yes, we can. We'll now move to the Meet the Candidates portion. I nicknamed it the other night at the fundraising committee meeting. I was sleep deprived. I'd taken the red eye back. I decided it was speed dating for Liberals. I encourage you to mingle, enjoy our delicious food and refreshment while enjoying the company of our guests. I just also want to make a note that our caterer is local from Warkworth, our beer is coming from Church Creek Brewery in Kilford, and our wine is from Prince Edward County. And of course our very helpful and accommodating staff here at the Columbus Centre have done a fabulous job. But I also want to put a little plug in. This centre was built in 1989, 1990, if I remember correctly. They just got a new sound system, and we're the first to use it. So yet another first. I just also want to quickly mention there are contact forms over in this corner. And what we did was we wanted an opportunity for all of you, if you'd like to get in touch with the candidates at a later date, if you want more information from them, if you'd like to help them in their campaign, if you'd like to donate to them, not until after November 14th, because that's a rule, but we have contact forms with all their names on it. All you need to do is check off who you'd like, and maybe you want to talk to all of them, and put your name, your phone number, your email, whatever your most efficient form of contact is. And if you just drop them in the bag there, we will take them and forward that information to each candidate, and they'll get in touch with you. But I think it's a way to continue this engagement to the next step. Because if we want to be part of the solution, we really do have to be part of the solution. So, now that I've sort of done the plug, I also want to remind you not to forget to bid on our fabulous silent auction items. There has been a lot of work done by Steph and Marin and a number of people and Patty who have gone around to our local community supporters, and you'll notice in that room there are a lot of community supporters of this Liberal Party that donated some very nice things. So we would like you to bid on them. Some of them may bring you back into the riding if you're not from here, so please do that. The other thing is, I just want to remind you that the election now, in 2015, is officially less than 3 years away. Now that is if Stephen Harper keeps his fixed election date, but we all know that's not necessarily the case. We have a lot of work to do. Your support, your generosity, your coming here tonight is so appreciated, and we will be working with you, I hope, over the next 2.5 or so, 3 years, going forward into the next election. In the meantime, we've got a leadership race going on that you can be involved in. Really, there's no end to politics in the Liberal Party right now. So, great time to be here. I'm going to turn it back over to Tom, and you'll notice the bar is open.
Well, you've had enough speakers. Let me just say, the bar is now open. There's some terrific treats coming out, chocolates, coffee, some more food, that kind of thing. This is a fundraiser. You are Liberal supporters. We are looking for you, please, to go and take a look at the at the silent auction and to bid once and bid twice and keep on bidding until it's all gone. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please help me thank our speakers? You have them at your disposal for the next hour or so. Meet them, greet them, ask them your questions that you couldn't ask on the microphones. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let the party continue.